I never thought that it would end this way, with no last look upon your face. I always thought that we'd be hanging out until we all are rolling gray. Now you have chose your fate. I can tell by your eyes. Oh, let there be some cake for you tonight. Oh, let there be some cake. I used to wish that I could fix you, but now I wish I didn't miss you. I always said I would be there for you. I guess I'll never know the truth. Now you have chose your fate. I can tell by your eyes. Oh, let there be some cake for you tonight. Oh, let there be some cake. I never got to say goodbye to you. Just know that I will not forget you. Now you have chose your fate. I can tell by your eyes. Oh, let there be some cake for you tonight. Oh, let there be some cake.
Warning: this podcast features adult subject matter, adult language, and things not meant for children to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. You've been warned. Live, everybody, here on the I'm No Joe YouTube channel. I should probably adjust this camera a little bit. I'm used to sitting up in the chair. There we go. Live, everybody, here for the, what did I say, show? Episode number 7. This time around, talking about the past weekend's, yesterday's really, UFC Fight Night 167 / ESPN plus 9 / Rio Rancho. It's, you know how they do. It's the UFC. This one also, to get it up front and out of the way, was originally supposed to cover BKFC 10, the debut of Hector Lombard, which I was very excited about. The gentlemen on the I'm No Joe show were all very excited about. A bunch of the fans were very excited about it because this was a huge prospect, a very large name in the striking world, making his way over to the bare knuckle world. And BKFC shit the bed. There were people with the DAZN app who could not keep BKFC 10 broadcasting. I had several acquaintances who were using, let's say, outside of the conventional means to try and watch the BKFC 10 broadcast, and even they could not get luck when they generally have no issues finding any type of broadcasted sport, no matter what country or sport it may be, allegedly. So, to the best of my knowledge, the only people who really got to see BKFC 10 were the people who were sitting in the stadium where it happened, or in the arena where it happened, which kind of sucks. I got to see a little bit of the prelims when the DAZN app was still working. there was one gentleman who quite literally got knocked out and bounced off his face and then revived and stood up and was wondering why his fight got stopped. I can't remember the gentleman's name because the DAZN app crashed in the middle of that, and I just never really went back to the actual BKFC page to look into it because it just got so frustrating from there on out. The DAZN app would not work. The other unconventional methods were not working either. So really, I don't know many people who use any streaming service legitimately or illegitimately that could keep it watched. And that's disappointing because it really had, as for as small of an event as it was, this was going to be the smallest BKFC event that they had put on so far, but it still had some good potential on it. And we ended up with none of that, and that just kind of sucks. So we'll jump right into the Rancho talks. Give me just a second here. Sorry, allergies are kicking my ass. I'm trying to get ahead of it here. So, the one little thing here, I'm going to talk about it here. I'm also going to talk about it on next week's I'm No Joe podcast because this bears repeating, especially after the extreme fucking praise that we gave on last week's I'm No Joe episode regarding this particular individual. We do our show on Thursday nights. Weigh-ins are Friday morning. Ceremonial weigh-ins are generally Saturday morning or Friday evening. So we do our podcast and we make our predictions before the weigh-ins because the weekends are just, it's too busy to try and get as big of a show as I'm No Joe is worked into all of our schedules, including myself, on a Friday night, as well as doing, the extra bit of research, and it's too much. We couldn't do it any other night than Thursday. Thursday works perfect for us. The bad part is that, like I said, weigh-ins are traditionally Friday morning for UFC events, and we had a weird one, I will say. We had a pro who was not a pro after we sang so much fucking hype about him during the I'm No Joe show. Sorry about that. Ray Borg, returning to 125. Steps on the scale Friday morning, 128 pounds. Over the limit. They give him his hour, which they generally at most weigh-ins do. If you miss weight, you have an hour to go and drop whatever weight you have exceeding the limit and come back and weigh in again. So Ray Borg leaves. We don't have details as to what exactly he did, but he left. And he came back almost an hour later, and he weighed in again. And he weighed in for the second time at 128 pounds. He did not lose a single ounce in the hour that he had to make weight, and he was only shy by 2 pounds. He literally had to lose 2 pounds that should have already been lost because this is where he fights at 125. So those 2 pounds shouldn't have been an issue to begin with, but when they were, because sometimes shit happens, and I get it. So when those 2 pounds did become an issue and he had that hour, he should have quite literally just went and jogged circles in the fucking sauna or something, because if this is your weight class and it's just 2 pounds at the very last minute, this should not be an issue to cut. If this is an issue to cut, maybe 125 really isn't the place for Ray Borg anymore. Maybe he really does need to go up to 135 and he needs to acclimate to it, because you can't go to 135, fail, come back to 125, and then fucking miss weight. You can't do that. That's not allowed. And I get that that's kind of a fucking ridiculous standard to set, but this is also talking about the highest level of professionalism. And we're talking about a guy who was a former title contender who's working his way back to title contention. If that's what you want, then you have to fucking act like it. And your first fight back to your division, you can't fucking miss weight, and you can't do it twice. I'm sorry. I fucking love Ray Borg, and I think he is a legitimate badass, and I think 125 he does very well. But if this is how we see him, quote unquote, coming back to 125, then just stop right fucking now, nip it in the bud, and just move on up to 135 and acclimate yourself, because you can't pull this kind of shit with all the fuckery that Cejudo has injected into 125 and 35. We have to get the guys, as much as it pains me to fucking say it, like Benavidez, like Davison. You know, we need to get these serious guys who are ready to be professionals, show up, make weight, put on the fucking fight, not play the cringe game, not play the fucking talking game. Guys who are ready to set an example and show why the UFC should keep the smaller divisions, because it still never said they'll be here forever. It says they're not going anywhere. We also know how Dana can be, so they could be going somewhere, and especially if we got clowns like Cejudo who are tying up both of the smaller divisions. You can't let that kind of shit happen if that's your playground, so to speak. So wanted to talk about that real quick first and foremost. That will, like I said, get mentioned again on the I'm No Joe podcast this coming Thursday, because no one else on the entire fucking card missed weight. No one. None of the scrubs, none of the debut makers, none of the short notice fight takers missed weight. But Ray fucking Borg missed weight. So that's aggravating, because we all sang a lot of high fucking praise about Ray Borg, and he deserves it for the most part until shit like this happens. So he's already owned up to it right away. He knows that he fucked up. He says he's going to get better. We'll see. He also said the last time that he missed weight, that the next time he missed weight, he would retire. So that didn't happen. He said he's not retiring. He said he's going to fix it. So time to fucking fix it. Shit or get off the pot now. That kind of an asterisk next to your name, that's the fourth time he's missed weight. That's excessive. So moving on from there. Woosah. Let's actually talk about the UFC Rio Rancho, New Mexico / Fight Night 167 / UFC on ESPN Plus 9, I think it was. Whatever the ridiculous amount of excessive names that were slathered along to this poor fucking thing have become. Right out of the gate, the first matchup we talked about not only set the precedent, or was to set the precedent for the evening, but it had a chance to, if everything went as planned, start off the evening on a spectacular victory and securing one half of a historic event that, to my knowledge, hasn't really been attempted very many times at all. So it was going to be the first, and it was definitely going to be a standout moment, potentially. The first husband and wife to win in the same night on the same card in a major promotion combat organization. The De La Rosas, the first couple of BJJ, right out of the gate. Mark De La Rosa. On paper, everything looked good. It looked like it was lined up. Not that it was going to be a walk in the park, but it's a fight that should be winnable for De La Rosa to secure his half of that power couple historic moment. And out of fucking nowhere, he got clipped super clean and absolutely put to sleep. And it's difficult to describe. It's never a good thing to see someone get knocked out. But sometimes, for a fighter to learn, they have to see that what they're doing isn't working in real time. They have to feel the results of what they think something should be not work correctly, so that they can grasp it and understand that a change has to be made. And it's never a good thing. You never want to see someone get knocked out for that to happen. But I feel like in what we did get to see of this matchup, we never got to see any.
Where are the white women at?
where are the white women at? I mean, we did get to see a lot of that during the fight, but during Mark's fight particularly, we did not get to see any of his wrestling. We didn't get to see any of his grappling. We didn't get to see any of that fucking jujitsu that makes him part of the first couple of BJJ. The first couple to come through and win on the card was set to do so with their basis of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we didn't get to see that. And I'm not trying to take away anything from
Hey, where the white women at?
where the white women at from Mr. Paiva. He definitely came out and put on one hell of a performance. He absolutely earned that victory, and he did exactly what he needed to do to beat Mark. But I feel on the other side of that coin that a lot of that happened because Mark was not doing what Mark does. The reason that we give him high praise, that we are such big cheerleaders of the first couple of BJJ normally. So props to Mr. Paiva. He definitely made one hell of a debut for himself. Hopefully Mark took this as a little bit of a learning experience, and that, like I said, I never want to see someone get knocked out to learn, but he either wasn't sticking to the game plan, or for whatever reason his game plan was to not use one of his strongest tools against a very flashy and movement oriented opponent here in Paiva. But either way, I hope he gets it straightened out. So moving along from there, the first short notice replacement fight, Macy Chazon versus the injured but still in the audience, Nico Montano, against her 5-day short notice fight acceptor, former Invicta fighter. There you go with the words. Shayna Young. Macy was a 700 favor by Vegas to win this. She should have won this match easily. Once we got into the fight, it was very clear that Shayna Young was not on Macy Chazon's level at any point. As soon as the fight enacted and we got to actually see things playing out in real time, it was very, very apparent that Macy Chazon should have been able to just engage, put her skills to use, and end this fucking fight fairly quickly and efficiently, and we should have been able to move on with our fucking evening. And that is not what we saw. What we saw was a whole lot of Macy Chazon riding the struggle bus. We saw basic bullshit being very difficult for both Macy and Shayna Young. And we saw a very sloppy judge's decision go to Macy Chazon. So a W is a W, as they say. Enjoy your win, ma'am. Definitely do not brag about that to anyone. Moving along from there to the comic relief / entertainment of the evening. This was not a fight. This was quite literally a Benny Hill sketch without yakety sax being played over the loudspeaker. Talking about Casey Kenny versus Mareb Valshili. This was quite possibly, at the same time, the most entertaining and least realistic looking fight I have ever seen in my entire life. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be over dramatic. I literally was laughing so fucking hard during this fight, I almost passed out. My fucking ribs were cramping. I had tears streaming down my fucking face, and I could not breathe. I was laughing so fucking hard watching this fight. And these 3 mile away, telegraphed like it's the 1800s, unnecessary and unguided spinning back fist attempts were one of the most laughable examples of gentlemen who are not ready to be fighting on television I could possibly have given you. The level of just sheer rookie status exhibited by both gentlemen in this fight are part of the reason that I and many others say that we need to have a fucking B League. If Bellator and the UFC and ONE FC and Ryzen are going to be the pros, that's cool, but we need some sort of official B League. We can't just rely on the fucking Dana White Contender Series. That's its own separate fucking dumpster fire. They can't decide if they're going to bring the Ultimate Fighter back, if they're not going to bring it back, if they're going to put value on the winner of the Ultimate Fighter because they just cut Brad Katona with a record of 6-2, who just won one of the most recent fucking seasons of the Ultimate Fighter. Not a bad guy, great fucking fighter, easily promotable, 6-2 record, won the Ultimate Fighter. UFC cut him, so obviously they're still not putting any fucking value on winning any of these UFC programs that they're putting forth. So we need some sort of official universal B League, some Bush League, some AAA minors that are sanctioned directly to the big guys so that we can stop this fucking charade of thinking that everyone in the UFC nowadays deserves to be on television because they're filling roster spots. And you're supposed to. You're an organization. The problem is you don't see the guy who just signed on as a rookie starting the fucking game. He's got to get some practice in somewhere. Your first game in the pros, you don't open the league fucking first game of the year under all the bright lights. You have to get acclimated to doing the pro thing. It's a separate world. We don't see that. And then we get fights like this absolute dumpster fire. The amount, like, I encourage anyone who is into this sort of thing. I would never encourage anyone who has had any sort of a problem in this area to do so, but anyone who is inclined to see things on YouTube or in movies and make them into drinking games, take a shot every time one of the gentlemen in that fight does a spinning attack of some variety. But disperse them amongst the crowd. Don't try and take that all to yourself, because that would absolutely end up with someone having alcohol poisoning. But you'll see what I mean if you go back and watch that fight again. So many bad spins. Avoidably bad spins. Now, moving on from there. What I was calling one of the dark horse fights on this card. Devin Clark versus Daquan Townsend. This had all the possibility to be an absolute just barn burner of a striking match. It turned out to be an interesting match. It didn't necessarily go the way that we thought it would, which, as we say time and time again, you can't rely on MMA math. That's not how that works. What we're giving you is a general guess, an informed guess, an informed assumption based on the facts that we have seen, the previous instances we have seen of these individuals and the things that we know about their styles. But one of the reasons I love the fight world is because nothing is set in stone in the fight world. You can guess all you want. You can guess where the white women at, but you're never going to be for certain. There's no guarantees in the fight world. That's why sayings like, it is what it is, and puncher's chance exist, because there's no guarantees no matter how you look at it in the fight world. We looked at a wrestler in Devin Clark of a very high degree going up against a striker of Daquan Townsend of a very high degree to be an interesting stylistic matchup. What we saw was Daquan Townsend not able to follow up with the striking that we have seen from him before, and aversely, Devin Clark able to use some wrestling to get the fight to the ground, but not do anything with it once he had it there time and time again. Neither one of these gentlemen were really capitalizing on their strengths, and it made for a little bit of a boring and kind of a frustrating fight to watch as a fan here. Excuse me. Whew. But the thing about the Daquan Townsend versus Devin Clark fight that really made me appreciate this match and encourage everyone that is a fan, that is listening to this, to go back and rewatch this fight. It's not for the striking. It's not for the grappling. It's for what you hear from Daquan Townsend's corner when he's down after the second fight. They tell him flat out, he will fold, but you have to make him. You're not using your hands. This is your fight to win. You have to use your hands. Do what you do or you will lose. You can do this. Now show us. They didn't give him no flashy bullshit. They didn't give him a, you're doing good, but you need to work on this. They didn't give him it was a rough round. We couldn't tell. Maybe you got one. Maybe he got one. No, they gave him exactly what he needed to fucking hear. They gave him the truth, and they fucking inspired him, and it fizzled. 20 seconds into the fucking round, it fizzled. I was having a Rocky moment in my fucking living room. That corner had me fucking hyped up. And he just let it slip away when he got right back in there. He let Devin Clark take him right back down and then not be able to fucking capitalize on it. And we got to see a long, grueling, aggravating battle that should have been spectacular. And that fucking corner's motivational fucking speech after the second should have had Daquan Townsend ready to punch a hole through the fucking floor and just dig a straight hole to China. But for whatever reason, the fucking motivation lasted 20 seconds on him, and he went right back to what he was doing before and got taken right back down to the ground like he had before and spent the majority of the fight just getting battered from the top by a Devin Clark who wasn't able to effectively capitalize from the very gracious position he was given by the lack of Daquan Townsend doing what he needed to fucking do. That being said, this fight, I believe should have been given fight of the night. Jim Miller versus Scott Holtzman was every bit the battle we expected it to be, and so much more.
And
Not,
where the white women at?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Not that we ever want to see Jim Miller lose, because we are very pro Team Jim Miller around the I'm No Joe podcast. But if there was one that he had to lose, this is about as close to acceptable as I think we could get, because this was an absolute fucking war, and Jim looked like a goddamn stud. His fucking striking was crisp. His fucking game was just beautiful all the way around. And the problem was, so was Scott's. Scott was fucking crisp, and Scott was right there going trade for fucking trade. It was give and take the whole fucking fight from start to finish. It was a beautiful fucking battle all the way through. And if you have to lose one, those are the kind that I would say are as close to being acceptable of a loss as you can have. Because there was no one-sided moment in that fight. It was a teeter-totter from start to finish. It was a great fucking battle. Much respect to Scott Holtzman. Literally, none of us could call it when we were waiting for the judge's decision. That's the definition of one of those situations where the judges better be on their fucking money, because this, had it been a real off scoring, which it wasn't, it was pretty good. It was even, you could see it going either way depending on your point of view. Nothing robbery like. I was in favor that Miller did more, that outstruck more, had more octagon control. I was absolutely Team Miller won that, but I can also understand watching that fight how they could have given it to Holtzman because of some of the movements that he was making and some of the ways it seemed like he might have had control. Frustrating, but it was a damn good fight. It was a much better fight than I think we really expected it to be. Not that we ever really expected Jim Miller fight to not be great, but sometimes we end up with a quick submission like we did in his previous fight. So, sorry, I'm trying to turn the white women down a little bit here. There we go. So, moving along to the next fight here. Props to the magician. the OG King of Cringe, John Dodson, finally shaved that stupid fucking floppy, cheap looking afro he had growing off his fucking head. It was like a modern version of a Three Stooges haircut. It just didn't look right, at least not on him, anyways. But he got rid of it. We got back to the old John Dodson we were used to seeing, and he came out and he performed like the old John Dodson we were used to seeing. He really did. Nathaniel Wood, to his credit, was absolutely giving every bit of the effort that he tried. But John Dodson popped that kid's eye to the extent that immediately one of the first things that we said is that the Nate Diaz Dr. New York was screaming at the TV when that fight got let go. Absolutely furious. But, you know, hey, he went back out there, but Dodson did work. Props to John Dodson. This is why I said you can't completely disregard this guy, because he's been out of the limelight, so to speak, for a little bit. He has always got that potential there from what we've seen anyway, and I hope that he stays on this trail and he gets right on Cejudo's ass. Fucking defender vacate, motherfucker. Like, you jumped on that train early. Well, now you're bottleneck in two divisions, bitch, and you got plenty of fucking contenders on both sides. Well, not two divisions anymore, is it? But I don't think he should be holding the belt that he is either. So I think it's time to get that motherfucker out of the way, and let's just brush that cringy fucking piece of shit back into the laughable folds of history. Now, that brings us to our premier prelim fight. And before I even talk about this fight, I have to take a quick moment to apologize here. Somehow, in my preparation, as well as Galti and Nick's, and I don't know about Lynn because she's casual and that's not how she does things, but those of us that did our preparations, that were doing our research prior to this episode to talk about this fight, obviously looked up the Dirty Birds highlight reel. There was not a whole lot of previously accessible Daniel Rodriguez material, I guess would be the proper word. I did not realize until after we had already recorded why, because we were all looking for a gentleman who was named Daniel Rodriguez instead of looking for Joe Schilling's training partner and wrestling coach, D-Rod Wrestling. That immediately made the fight a hell of a lot more interesting as soon as we all realized that, which we did Friday evening, Saturday early, before the fight had actually started, and we did discuss that. So everybody fucks up once in a while. You ever fuck up? I fucked up. I can admit to that. I missed it. Should have got it, and I didn't. I missed it. I fucked up. I'll own it. Props to Mr. Rodriguez, though. He not only had taken this fight on short notice, but then went in and did some absolute beautiful fucking work against the Dirty Bird. This was a fucking hard-fought fight, and at the end, he was getting on the fucking Dirty Bird. The thing about... Okay. Caveat. I and several other people who were not watching this fights together, as well as some of the people who were watching this fight with me, all agreed this entire night of fights had a very weird vibe about them. There was a weird feeling watching several of these fights going on. And I don't mean it in a fucking hokey, I don't mean it in a fucking, religious or a spiritual fucking scene. What I mean is that something just about the way the event unfolded, something about certain fights, certain points in the evening just felt off compared to what we're used to in a UFC event. This was one of those matchups, and I wish that I could put my fucking finger on exactly what it was that felt off or felt so fucking weird, but I can't, unfortunately. But this fight, as well as several other fights, the De La Rosa fight particularly, right out the gate, it felt weird watching Mark not using his grappling. Watching that fight unfold had a weird feeling to it. Watching the Dirty Bird fight had a weird feeling to it. Several different points just had an off sense about them. Even as a fan watching on television, it had a weird feeling about it. Props to Daniel Rodriguez for coming out and putting a beautifully slipped and fucking hard sank guillotine on the Dirty Bird to earn that fight. You know, or to win that fight, rather. He earned that W for sure. But this is one of the points where it just felt weird in the evening as well. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. A little thirsty. So, that will bring us meat and potatoes section of the evening. The main card. Lando Venata versus Yancy Medeiros. What can I say about this fight? Lando Venata must have been watching Enter the Dragon on his little TVs in the warm-up room before he came out. Because for the vast majority of that fight, he was quite literally walking around the octagon making Bruce Lee maneuvers, and I fucking swear to you people on everything that I love, at several points during that fucking fight, when he would throw a punch, he literally would, whoa! He was full on Lando Bruce Lee in that octagon, minus the technical skill and ability and clever wit of phrase and things like that. The first real ugly decision of the main card, but it absolutely, again, it is what it is. A win's a win. Lando Venata got the W, but he needs to focus a little less on that Bruce Lee and a little more on that guard your fucking face, you idiot. Adversely, Yancy just literally, we were actually talking about it during the fight. He does not look like himself anymore. He did not look like himself in the fight. He, like I said it on I'm No Joe, and I'm saying it again. Ever since Yancy and Cowboy fought, Yancy has not looked the same. And we had multiple people watching the fight with us Saturday night agreed. This does not look like the Yancy Medeiros that we have seen his entire career. For whatever reason, something happened in that Cowboy fight, and he has lost a little piece of that spark, and he hasn't gotten it back for whatever fucking reason. I don't get it, but it sucks. It sucks. Yancy Medeiros is a great fighter, but he's slowly just slipping out of the badassery that he used to be. He's losing a step every time we see him instead of gaining a step, and it sucks. It sucks. But, again, it is what it is. Now, this brings us to the Ray Borg versus Rogerio Botarin fight. You would think the gentleman who comes in weighing 3 pounds over 125, having already had to give up part of his purse, would take advantage of that weight difference and throw it around a little bit and try and just do what you need to do to win that fight, get that shit over with, get in and out of there, and get back to work and get things where they need to be. That is not what we saw with Ray Borg. What we saw was a guy who came in and was shorter but larger than his opponent and absolutely threw him around. Ray Borg was absolutely tossing him the fuck around, but he could not control him. He could not hold him. He could not capitalize on his wrestling, which looked spectacular. His chain wrestling particularly looked beautiful. He would not let one go. He would hit you with one when you stood up, throw you with the second, let you help him stand up to throw you with the third. or throw you with the first to set him up in a position so when the second comes through, you were down much better than you were the first time and exhausted now. His wrestling legitimately looked very, very good. His grappling, on the other hand, not so fucking great. He could not capitalize. His submissions, I don't know where the fuck they were, and his striking left a whole lot to be desired from a gentleman who should have come in and legitimately been putting on a show as an apology for missing weight and trying to make the statement that this is where he belongs and that he should be taken seriously at 125. He sure screwed the pooch pretty fucking hard in this match. Granted, he got the win. It was a decision. It was not pretty, but he got the win. Now, that brings us to the next fight here. Rodrigo Vargas was absolutely winning every second of that fight and made a very poorly timed mistake that you could tell afterwards was one of those heat of the moment got to you. Shit, it's too late to make that up. Can't undo that. He threw a very violent knee to a very downed Brock Weaver and was called a disqualification. Fight is off. We had a not identical but a similar situation earlier on in the fight. Earlier on in the card on one of the earlier fights, but it was during a first round, so it would have been a no contest had it been stopped. They let it go on, didn't have to worry about that. But this situation, we were again in. No, I don't know. Sorry, I completely lost where the fuck I was going with that. I don't know. This was ruled a disqualification, not a warning. Knee to a downed opponent. He didn't need the knee. He should have just fucking kept punching. I don't know where the fuck that sidetrack came from. Moving along from there, the other half of the potential first couple of BJJ, the potential history making, regardless of how the earlier night went, Mark was out in the corner for Montana, and Montana came out and started to absolutely do work. Montana, although she did not finish, was absolutely 100% dominant in that fight from the opening bell to the closing bell. She was controlling where the action went. She was dominating wherever the action was. She was fighting very, very intelligently. And, you know, originally we had said that we were hoping that Mark was going to help teach Montana a little bit about fighting these strikers and fighting, you know, using your jiu-jitsu against these strikers. And turns out he didn't use any of his jiu-jitsu against the striker, and he got knocked the fuck out. And she came out and did some striking against her striker and did some jiu-jitsu and some wrestling when there was wrestling time. And she's the one who was doing everything correct, and he was the one that was fucking everything up Saturday night. So props the fuck to you. Like I said, there's a reason we've been singing their praises. Mark, just for whatever reason, didn't seem to have it. Montana was still on fucking point and is still posing a very big problem to the women's flyweight division. I'm telling you, she's slowly etching her way up that hill, and I can't fucking wait to see her keep climbing. She's on a hell of a run right now. That, however, will bring us to the weird co-main event that actually ended in what the fuck, like full on what the fuckery. Full on down knee. Pereira is doing his typical flashy shit. Diego was trying to be flashy back at him. That fight was a shit show from start to finish. I don't really know how much more Diego Sanchez I'm going to be able to tolerate as a fucking fan. But I know exactly how much more Michael Pereira I'm able to tolerate as a fan, and I can tell you it's this much. I'm fucking done with that douchebag piece of shit. I don't need to see that motherfucker fight in the UFC anymore. He can go crush cans over in Ryzen. He can get sent over to Bellator to help them fill their roster with soup cans. I don't care, but I don't think he needs to be in the UFC fighting at the elite levels anymore. That dude is a world-class piece of shit and a laughably unteachable fighter from what we've seen. He's not UFC material, period. As a fan, I can tell you that's not the kind of guy that needs to be in the UFC. But that will bring us to the meat and potatoes of the meat and potatoes for the meat and potatoes that was the meat and potatoes in the meat and potatoes of the meat and potatoes segment. The main event. Corey Anderson versus Jan Blachowicz. 205, the rematch, the run back 5 years from the first event. Corey Anderson came out looking almost too calm. I get wanting to maintain your composure. I get wanting to stay that cool as a cucumber look. But man, Corey looked like he just, for whatever reason, wasn't enough in the moment like he should have been. He wasn't as present as he should have been. And I get that you don't have to be hyped up and jumping in jitsi and whatever, but he looked like his mind was somewhere else. Like he was focusing on something else mentally as that fight was leading up. And you know what? Polish power is fucking real, man. Jan Blachowicz had great takedown defense. He had great fight IQ. And he had fucking crisp and strong fucking striking. I 100% believe is going to be the next fight for Jon Jones. I don't think the UFC, despite what they said, really does like the Dominic Reyes rematch immediately. I think there's definitely a shot for a rematch down the road. But I feel like, just like Thiago Santos, he realistically should, in my opinion, have gotten the next rematch. Still should have been the next guy to fight Jon Jones. You should have shelved Jon Jones and made him wait for Santos. And I get that that's a little ridiculous, but I also agree that that fight was a little ridiculous. Dom Reyes versus Jon Jones. Great fight, but we shouldn't have been to that point yet. And now, as much of a great fight as that was, and we want to see the return, we're going to have to wait for that fucking rematch again, because now it looks like we've got Jan Blachowicz stepping up to get the next potential title shot. He called out Jon. Jon called him out. Jon, also being the piece of shit that he is, took a moment during his little interview to say that he was glad that Jan won because Corey was talking shit, and that he doesn't like people who talk shit because they should get their ass kicked and blah, blah, blah. Typical Jon Jones being an asshat fucking talk. Jon Jones. Well, it looks like, for all intents and purposes, the UFC is going to be matching our favorite gigantic Polak against the Albuquerque Sun himself for the next light heavyweight title defense in the UFC. Now, as always, that's not set in stone. That's just the way that things appear right now. So we will absolutely have to keep our eyes out to see how they actually shake loose and where things actually go in the near future. But that is all we have for this particular episode of the What Did I Say show? The place where I like to hold us accountable for the shit that we talked earlier on. Sometimes we get it right, and it makes you feel good. And sometimes we get it wrong, and you learn. Either way, that's all we've got for this one. So, if you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up. If I give you a couple of point of views you hadn't seen before that kind of made you think a little bit, maybe subscribe. I'd appreciate it. If I really tickled your fancy, if I gave you a point of mind that just blew a point of view that just blew your mind, share an episode from the I'm No Joe podcast. Share a What Did I Say episode. Share something here. We're trying to grow this show. On the other side of that, If I'm just some dipshit sitting in front of his computer not knowing what the fuck I'm actually talking about, give me a thumbs down. I won't dispute it at all. That being said, though, if you do like the I'm No Joe podcast that we do live every Thursday night, 9:30 p.m.-ish Central Standard Time, you can catch that here on the YouTubes, or if these Instagram influencer faces of ours tend to be a little too distracting for you, you can also now go to anchor.fm/I'm No Joe to catch the I'm No Joe podcast in all of its breathy audio glory with none of the facial distractions on your particular platform of choice. Google Podcast, Apple Music, iTunes, Stitcher, Breaker, you name it. Spotify, we're on Spotify. I'm No Joe is on Spotify. How fucking scary is that? This face for radio and voice for television is Spotify bound. If that's not terrifying, I don't know what is. But that's all we've got for this particular episode. So thank you to everyone who came out and watched this live. Thank you to everyone who is catching this on a replay. We're going to get the fuck out of here. So remember, don't let ignorance stop you. You can root for anything. Unless, of course, the anything you want to root for is autopsy results showing Jeffrey Epstein actually having killed himself. And if that's the case, then
everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up, they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a slip, and a kicking from the hip. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing.
How do I say goodbye to what we had? The good times.